I'm going to call the city council work session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Councillor Weber. Here. Councillor Moe.
Here.
Councillor Rodley. Here. Councillor Blackwell. Here. Councillor Doyle. Here. And Councillor Pictionary.
Here, thank you. We have one item tonight, which is the transportation sidewalk funding prioritization. Drew, one up.
Good evening, all. Drew Larson, City of Springfield Transportation Planner. I believe Christy Kruger is online and is available for questions following the quick staff discussion and presentation. I also have Mr. Ben Gibson from operations, as well as I believe Stan Petroff, city engineer, is also online. At least I hope so. And so tonight is a continuation, there we go, of the sidewalk conversation we had right before your summer break. Welcome back. So with that, the Metropolitan Planning Organization has awarded the city of Springfield $3.9 million to address Springfield's walking and biking network. The grant provides enhanced safety crossings throughout Springfield, including refugee islands along the E-Web path at 5th and 19th Streets, and rapid flashing beacons on 5th Street, Mohawk Boulevard, and Thurston Road. Those can be seen in attachment 3. The remainder of the grant, approximately $2.5 million, is intended for sidewalk construction and ADA upgrades throughout Springfield. So the awarded funding includes money from the carbon reduction program, as well as the congestion and mitigation and air quality. Both of these pots of money are intended and limited in their use to reduce emissions and vehicle congestion by constructing new sidewalk connections, as well as new multi-use paths that feed into the regional pedestrian system. These federal funds must be programmed and all projects constructed by September 30th, 2025. The design must be completed early 2024 so that the bid process and construction can take place before the 2025 deadline. So at the previous work session before the break, Council directed staff to identify a list of projects in and around all Springfield schools and express the desire for adjacent property owner participation. So really the only mechanism to include property owner participation with these grant dollars is a local improvement district. And council could elect to proceed with one of those. It'll take about a year to adopt, which could potentially delay design and ultimately delivery of this project, which could put the federal dollars in jeopardy. So because of the complexities of forming the improvement district, staff has recommended 4 projects tonight to provide connections around school and without adjacent property owner participation. 3 of the recommended projects provide new east-west connections around Hamlin Middle School. They include an extension of the Bi-Gully path from Pioneer Parkway to 5th Street through existing city property and formalizing from Pioneer Parkway to 5th Street, as well as a connection in the Olympic Street right-of-way from 5th to 6th, as well as new pedestrian paths through Pleasant Street between 8th and 10th Street. So these 2 connections, or these 3 connections, would not only provide greater access to the Hamlin Middle School by either, sports participants, student getting to Hamlin Middle School, it would also connect 2 neighborhoods currently split by Pioneer Parkway. I did talk with the school district about these 3 projects. They were excited about the Bi-Gully path extension, and we're excited to work with the city on providing either a new connection to Hamlin Middle School from that northwest side or something along there. The school does like to control their accesses, but they were excited about that, as well as express support for the new connections east of this street. Again, that Olympic Street and the Pleasant Street rights of way. The 4th project that we've recommended is the Douglas Gardens frontage. That's South 37. That's from Jasper to, I believe it is Woodburn, Redwood Avenue along that frontage. Currently, students are being dropped off in the grass, and as we all know, Oregon gets wet, can get muddy. So students walking from the north, as well as getting dropped off, would now have a safe place to walk into the school. So the cost estimate for the 4 recommended projects shown in the briefing memo is approximately 2.5 million, which equals what is available following the enhanced crossing connections that have been predetermined. Lastly, staff has prepared and included an alternative list of projects around schools in the council briefing memo for council's consideration. These projects are identified as needed for access to schools, but would include property owner participation. So council could elect to replace one of these projects with the recommended from the list. Thank you. That's all I have this evening.
So, in regards to conversation about the projects you are speaking about on the flashing beacons, specifically the Thurston Road one, it was my understanding, I could be wrong, but a conversation about 18 months ago, maybe 24 months ago, in regards to a rapid RFB at the intersection of 66th and Thurston, because it's at the north end of Ridgeview Elementary, where there's a lot of children wanting to cross at that intersection is currently not protected. And I'm trying to understand the logic behind going to the 69th when there's less people in that area compared to 66.
Unfortunately, I wasn't privy to that conversation. That happened well before my time as in this role. And my understanding is that these were just the identified projects with our application with the Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm sure that doesn't help you at all with your question.
No, it doesn't get me where I want to go.
Yeah.
I'm just putting it out there. I don't support that location of 69th. And I would support it at 66 only because of the increased child safety. And we're talking about doing all this stuff around schools. And yet this is several blocks over from where school traffic with kids are at.
Not sure if Christie's online and has any
Yeah, let me pull her up as a panelist for you so that she can talk.
You're gonna have children traffic coming from Ridgeview Elementary, but also through Thurston Middle School. This seems like a logical spot.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Christy.
Oh, good. So you can hear me? Can you hear me?
Maybe she can't hear us.
We can hear you, Christy.
Oh, good. Okay, there it is. Good evening, Mayor and Council. 66th Street is a location that we need to study because we have site distance issues over there. And what we were thinking about in the past was taking a look at a mini roundabout at that location where we could use the existing right-of-way and not have to acquire additional right-of-way. So if that's something that Mayor and Council want us to look at, we can go ahead and put that on our list.
But, well, it was, I think, Chrissy, it was in our conversation about somewhere between 18 and 24 months ago, that was an intersection that had interest in, including the neighborhood.
Yes, there's definitely interest in improving the safety, but an RFB at that location is not the most ideal from the limited analysis that we have done because of the site distance issues. So there are other tools in the toolbox that could be potentially a safer remedy for that location.
So the money spent on the 69th Street facility, could that be applied to getting some work done on 66 now before those federal funds expire so we can get ahead of it? Or is it something that we're going to have to kick the can down the road again?
I think that we could look at it as a separate item, basically paralleling this and taking a look at it outside of this particular project. I think it's too late, for the federal funds. This is actually our first federally certified agency project that we'll be doing as a federally certified agency. So we're really excited about that. But we do have to get things rolling the end of this month to start that federal process.
So it wouldn't help us if we took the money off of 69th Street and then used it to plan 66th, or is that even possible? I guess,
I don't,
I don't think that's possible with
Okay.
this, the type of funding we have. That doesn't mean we can't look at some of our other transportation funds that we do have for this intersection. We also do have some other funds budgeted for intersections and matching funds that we could potentially move a study forward and then use that to look at the next round of transportation funding. I know that's been a gap with looking at a roundabout here was really the cost of that and then finding the funds to build a roundabout there.
yeah, go ahead, Drew.
I mean, we do have, with the awarded federal money and state money for the Mill Street, we had canceled the Q Street. So we have excess of, I think it was 3.7, so we're getting $2 million from the Fed. So we potentially have $2 million in federal money that could be applied to another project, and that is something I could certainly ask about. But I know that Q Street is a high priority as well, so it's kind of like, which one do we really want to prioritize?
Go ahead, Joe.
So at the risk of, I'm just hard, I know this area really well. And that I have a hard time fiduciarily seeing the benefit or the good benefit of having a beacon at that intersection based on the amount of foot traffic that is non-existent. In my mind, I don't know if you have foot traffic count, but I think that it may be other projects, including sidewalk projects, that can be used in lieu of spending the money at that intersection. Or there may be others that others may have something in their mind, but I mean, I know the area really well, and there's just so darn little foot traffic that, and that's a lot of money to put those in, but it may be better spent elsewhere.
Okay. Anybody else?
I just have a question, and I didn't think of it till you mentioned this, but if the 66th Street project was brought up 18 months or 2 years ago, then why did we not have the study done between now and then that
Government time.
we now have a month to? Never mind.
Okay, do you have other questions, Victoria? Okay.
No.
Go ahead, Victoria.
Okay, so I appreciate the work around Hamlin. I think that's great. And so this is just me going off book a little bit. Because I know that we don't have enough money to do this, and yet, when I look at this list here, and it's like technically in Ward 4, but it's so close, and I move in this neighborhood a lot. The G Street and the 23rd Street projects, particularly G Street, which is, I'm saying things out loud because maybe not everybody knows. It's a narrow street. We go from like wide streets at 21st to then it's a very narrow street, but it's a really throughway for people to both drive and walk. And around Maple Elementary, there's actually quite a bit of like school foot traffic around there. And so I'm just wanting to just highlight that, and maybe in some way, if we get 21st or 28 on the levee, to just think about that area, because it's pretty worn down over there. There's just a lot of people moving because you've got the Walmart and all of that over there that people walk and ride to. So I mean, I'm not wanting to pull from these because I know that's going to be a much bigger project because of how many people live there and needing to really think about it. But I could see that as part of that area of needing to invest in because it's needs it.
But you're fine leaving it on the unfunded list for right now.
Yes, as long as
we're
it
getting
stays a
in.
priority, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as like in the secondary round of priorities, because I really do think that area needs some support.
Drew, don't lose this list yet, because we're gonna come back to it. Go ahead, Beth.
I have a question. Victoria and I drove around and visited all the sites that are proposed. And one of the questions that I think we both kind of had is on the Pleasant Street pedestrian path. Since it's an alleyway that's graveled and it accesses, I think, at least two houses. Is the plan to put just a sidewalk in there, or what's the exact plan that you have for that? That was kind of confusing looking at it in person.
That's fair. it is kind of confusing because it is a full width right of way, so it could be a street. Why it is only acting as an alley right now with a gravel path, I don't know. I actually asked Stan to prepare the cost estimates for us, and I believe he was planning for a 5-foot wide asphalt path through there.
Through the center of the street or,
I'm not exactly sure where he was planning to place it. My guess was through the center.
okay. And on the, there was another one here, the Olympic Street pedestrian path. Would the trees need to be removed there? That's a pretty short little path.
There would be some tree removal to
Wondering what
formalize
the
that
cost, why the
connection.
cost was so high on that very short.
Yes,
Okay.
and that one was planned as a concrete connection point. Yeah.
Here I do have Stan as well, if you need him.
If you need Stan.
Stan,
Stan, do you have anything to offer from the sky?
No, it was the question about one of the path connections and where it was lined up at.
Correct.
Yes. Do you want to ask it again, Beth?
Yeah, the Pleasant Street pedestrian path. That's the gravel,
Okay.
gravel alleyway that accesses a couple residential homes.
Yeah, I think we just I sent her to write down the gravel path.
And where exactly, what was the plan there, I guess, where the walking path would be?
Yeah, I'd have to bring up the map again to look at it, but I think it was just, centered within whatever right of way we had there.
Okay.
Just putting the asphalt down, basically.
But it's a public street.
Gravel street.
Oh, gravel street. Yeah, sorry, I'm not familiar with it right now. Let me, if you can come back to me, I can bring it up and look at it.
Hang on 1 second, we're tagging in Jeff here.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, and most likely for costing estimates, you're just looking at kind of the straightest path. But if this is approved and we get to this on the list, that'll be all through the design process, because one of the things that we'll have to take in consideration with it being open on the one end is how do we protect that as a pedestrian path without vehicles accessing it, as we have issues with other multi-use paths. So there'll be a whole design process once we move into that phase. Right now, the estimate's just a high level. We're gonna put 5 feet and I don't know what Stan assumed, whether it's a 5-foot path, 8-foot path, but we would just do that to get a materials quantity and an estimate for what the construction cost would be. And then, when we do those estimates, then we just throw in a percentage of that for engineering and construction time engineering.
So we're not closing this street.
Well-
The path's not going through the middle of it.
Yeah, and we have to look, because if there's residents who take access off of that, we have to look at where that path goes so that anybody using that path as a pedestrian is protected from, residents accessing there. And so that's why I said there will be a whole design process once this is approved to get that path located and where it would be the safest place for pedestrians to use it.
It
And-
appeared that there was at least two homes on the north
Yeah, it
side and
looks
then a
like, yeah.
garage on the south
Yeah.
side.
Yeah, I haven't walked that path, so I don't know how if they use that alley or right of way for access or not, but all that'll be taken into consideration when the actual project kicks off and the design starts.
Okay.
So it's tough to say, where does it go today? We would just assume down the middle today or down there, it's pretty flat. So as far as grades and things like that, the construction looks pretty simple. For me, it looks like what's the right place for the pedestrians to be.
Victoria, did you?
Yeah, that's right. I assumed a 12-foot path, and like Jeff said, we didn't really go down too far down the design path of figuring out all the details. It was just to get a high level cost estimate. So just a length and a width and depth.
Go ahead. Are you done?
Just one,
Good, no, go ahead.
and I didn't have time to look it up on Arlid, but I don't think those homes have another access.
Correct.
That is their only access.
Yeah, so then we'd have to coordinate where their
So
driveway
it's alley,
is.
but it's actually their only.
Yeah, it's a right of way. So it's just an unimproved right of way. And that's why you probably see there's a guardrail on one side of it and it's not on the other, because that is their access.
Victoria?
Yeah, so like Counselor Blackwell said, we went and kind of looked at these to try to see physically see them and try to visualize. The Hamlin by Goalie path looks great, and that's a great idea, and just looking at what that will do to connect not only for the school, but for that entire eastern neighborhoods, to be able to put them out near Pioneer Parkway and like that whole area. So I'm all on board on that one. The second one, the Olympic Street pedestrian path, in looking at the costs on these other ones, it's really hard for me to visualize how that would cost $210,000 and why we would spend the money on that little tiny area. I don't support that one. I just think that the money could be used in a better way, hopefully in one of these other areas that's on the list. I mean, we drove in there and it was also where neighbors are at. And so there were houses, there was literally a house right here with a driveway and people were driving in and out, and then here's the path, and we're gonna try to do, so I'm not able to see how that works. In terms, and especially with the cost that's involved in that. And on the Pleasant Street, the 7th to 8th, we were on 9th Street, so we were sitting like right there. I could see 7th and 8th and 9th and or 8th to 9th and then 9th to 10th. And I don't see how it's feasible to put a walkway in this gravel drive that is the only access for two houses in a safe manner, or that would make sense unless you're gonna pave the whole thing. And so that's where I'm trying to understand on costs. And it surprises me that this is being brought to us. But those questions can't be answered, because if you want me to sign off on that, I need to know what the plan is, because there doesn't make sense to put in a 12-foot path and then have to tear it out at some point because we pave it, or it turns out that if you take 12 feet of that and then people are backing in and out of that because it is their only access, it just doesn't, I get wanting to connect them, totally see that, can't figure out how you're gonna do that part between 9th and 10th. And so that one I have a little bit of an issue with. The Douglas Garden sidewalk is a fantastic idea. I think Councilor Blackwell and I both looked at that and said, that is just, clearly we need that sidewalk, and you can see where it would be. And so that's a really positive one. So that's the only things I have, is that those two, I have my questions.
Okay. Thank you. Corey?
I can't remember. Oh, I was gonna just get some more clarification, which they answered about who was using that area and if it was somebody's was driving on it and all of that.
So I have similar concerns with the Pleasant Street. I agree that something should be done. With Councilor Doyle was saying, and Councilor Blackwell, something should be done because it makes sense. And the bike ped folks went out there and everybody agrees that connection should be safer, et cetera. But I gotta say too, it's like, I don't like Band-Aid work. I mean, it's rough, and it's always, you have to put a Band-Aid on there, you have to pull it off and put another one on down the road. And and at 335,000, that wouldn't come close to doing the job correctly. And I'm just wondering if it's a little premature to bring this job to us. But I would be much more interested to see some firm numbers with fixing it correctly, however that is, whether it's a street, I mean, even if it's not one of those, it's not curbed and sidewalk street, but if it's just paved from edge to edge, and that seems like that would eliminate that problem. But I know we don't typically pave edge to edge without the curbs and the sidewalks and fully improved. So I would entertain the thought, if we're willing to put a 12-foot path and let's make it a 22-foot path. I mean, but I don't know. I have some hesitation supporting this, even though I support the idea, but the numbers and the final answer, because they're not really getting answered on how you're going to do it. I can't even come close to what's being thought. So I'm kind of on that same thing, but again, the money's there for so long, it's a worthwhile cause, but I just don't know, we may have to rob Peter to pay Paul if it's done right. And as far as which one you would take from, I just don't know which one you take from, but I don't think that's going to be enough to do the job correctly.
So
He's got
Well, I was gonna say, so with this type of funding, I think where Drew's at and the project team is at is if the council is in an agreement that those two projects are not the right fit, I think it's look at the other project list and find something. So what happens is we have the big number up there for the Hamlin. And then, you know, we have the Douglas Gardens, which is kind of a sidewalk infill where we have the same issue. And it's like, we have this amount of funding and we're trying to find projects that kind of balance it out. And so I think what we would be then looking to the council to do is then, well, if those two aren't, you know, if the council doesn't really, that's why we have that other alternative list. If we could just fill something in, like looking at the Darling Street or something like that, that fills that and fills a simple void. So that, you know, like Darling's a full street, curb gutter and everything there. It just doesn't have sidewalks and it connects to Guy Lee, I believe. And
The challenge with Darling is that whole street is slowly imploding.
agreed.
So we're good at what sounds like on the Hamlin Middle School. Right, and then I think the bottom one, and the Douglas Garden one was, okay, so the question, you know, one addition that I had is I wanted to at least plug in, there's probably a 30-foot piece of sidewalk that Guy Lee needs because the turn in into Guy Lee, basically you walk in with the cars at the same time. And if everybody's supportive, I'd like to put that 30-foot piece of sidewalk on the list. Go ahead.
So we looked at that too. And are you talking about as you drive up the street and you go to turn into their parking lot, the two sides there? So isn't that private property? Isn't that the school property?
Well, it depends on where you look at it, right? So if you go to the south side, there's two ways to look at it. You see the path that goes right across, kind of a worn path that goes right across the park, which is on Willamette Lane's property. And you go, and that in the driveway is, yeah, I guess that would be in school, on school property.
Right, so are you talking about here?
Yeah, that's one of the designs I have heard is because it doesn't actually have ADA access that's right there.
But isn't that the school's property? That's not the city's property right there, is it? It looks like the right of way is here, and then you're talking about actually as it enters into the school. And so I'm just trying to understand if we're suggesting to fix something that's not public property.
Well, it is public property. It is on the school district, but if we were trying to fix something that is in the transportation world, right? Like right, wrong, or indifferent, right? That is a gap that they have that is insignificant, you know, is not that much to fix. So, go ahead.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
I think that's interesting because I'm like, well, whose property is it? Which I think would be helpful. But that is another area where there is quite a bit of pedestrian traffic. And bike traffic around those schools because you've got all those condos and all those things where people are walking their kids to school. So I'm supportive of getting that at least on this list so that we're keeping it in the forefront.
Go ahead.
Certainly not opposed to that, but typically school property, we do view as private property. And so typically it would be the school's responsibility to fix that. I did reach out to the Safe Routes to School Program Coordinator. And he said that it's in their facility plan, they're trying to find money for it on a continual basis, but finding money in their current operating budget is, as we all know, a constraint, but there is Safe Routes to School money that they could apply for and potentially get to do that on their property. But again, I'm not opposed to it by any
Well,
standard.
I understand that you're sharing the technical stuff without having a question, you know, without having an opinion about it. But if people, yeah, like when I looked at it as I would be arguing about moving that Darling project up with about $1.5 million, and you know, we didn't spend all the money. So go ahead.
Well, I just think that we have a list of city-owned property that we should be looking at first. I'm not opposed to that either. I think that when we looked at it, we could see why it's necessary, but I think that if we're gonna not do these other two, then we should be looking at the list that we were given, that's city stuff.
Yeah, but the reality is we can add to the list, right? So if you're not supportive, that's fine. we can go around that, we can find something else to spend the money on.
The kidless person and the twins.
Well, no, like, Good. So I'm curious if we remove the 69th Street signalization with the flashing beacon, what, do we know what the cost of that project would be or is?
I believe it's about 150,000 per rapid flashing beacon.
For that whole intersection work as opposed to.
Yeah, Christy just tuned in, but, Christy.
Yeah, that's accurate. That's about what we're spending for the RFB locations right now on Jasper Road for each location.
Okay. So you said about 150, so that'd be 545, 645, 695. So if we didn't do that and we took the Olympic Street and Pleasant Street projects out, that leaves them close to 700,000. And then if I look down below, of those projects, can those be prioritized based on need, or is that just so general that there's no real prioritization?
On the alternative projects list, those were just identified projects that fit the criteria in and around schools that we had been given direction with on the last work session.
So I think we ought to look at the list real hard right now. And amongst us, figure out.
We've got it, that's what the next step is. We got $700,000 of wiggle room here. So the question is, what else do you guys want to add to the list?
Correct. So it looks like we could take two of them out based on that.
Michelle? What you done?
Yeah, I'm good.
I just want to back you up a little bit on that Guy Lee spot. Having worked in that area, it's so congested, traffic, people walking, it's a nightmare for those kids. And whether it's our property or city property, I just think we need to consider, what that would do for safety for kids. Something to think about.
With that Douglas Gardens ones, there is actually a gap between the South 37 to the main entrance. And my hope is that if that project is recommended, that the school district could find some money to, at that same time, make that connection from the South 37 to the main entrance. It's about, I would say, 50 feet.
Well, there may be more than one way to go at this, right? So if people are like, if we move one of those Darlene ones up there, then we go back to the school, then we put money on the table. And then we go back to the school district and say, you need to finish the last, like for us, we will do these sections, but you need to finish the last 50 feet. I mean, like that, we get to the same result if people were. So what my concern with Darlene, and Jeff, you may have to help me with this, is that road gonna survive putting a sidewalk into it?
Well, yeah, I think because there's curb and gutter, so the sidewalk work will be outside of the asphalt. We can separate the two. The road, I guess then the pedestrians will have a really nice path, but the vehicles won't. So, I mean, just in the way it works. So, yeah, I know that road is in need of either some really intense preservation or a full depth reclamation, which is probably more likely. So, it may not survive construction vehicles, but a concrete truck going down there to put sidewalks, but yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I just think there's a public perception too. If we go throw in a sidewalk and then that road is trashed, what are people gonna say? I mean, regardless of the fact that we're trying to do something right. I know if it was just me, I'd be like, I got a road right here and you put a sidewalk, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's something to consider.
Did you have a different project?
Well, hey, I'm gonna pick East Street from 58th to 60th because it's in my ward. I haven't looked at these. So, I mean, I can't speak to them because we didn't have enough time to go out and actually look at these. I would be willing to do that and get back to you, but I can't. If you guys have seen these, I think that the G Street is a really good area. I know exactly what Councilor Rodley was talking about. So the 23rd Street, G Street. Maple Elementary.
We're just gonna have to decide. Like,
And Counselor, I would say on the road condition and Mayor, the one thing is with a lot of these roads, because they're older streets anyway, and that's why there's a lot of sidewalk gaps. Most of them, as far as the roadways themselves, are not in great shape. I mean, the South 37th Street, the best part of that might be where we put the sewer down there. And so, you know, I think kind of have to set the two things aside. I hear you, and I get the same conversation and questions from citizens, and it's really a prioritization, right? We have this bucket of funding, and it's for a specific type of project, and so we're doing the best thing we can do with that funds to find the best projects to fit and do the best good. On the flip side, that's why we're, you know, working on getting, you know, potentially another bond and all of that, because we have the same thing where we're not able to keep up on our street preservation.
so I think, and frankly, like the Darlene thing, all joking aside about that road, right? Those neighbors would be more than ecstatic just to get some attention to it. You know, and we need to rope some other, so we can start wrapping this up. Like, I would say we drop 69th. We're dropping Olympic, we're dropping Pheasant, and then we go ahead and add the Darlene, the south side, and then we make it sort of, and we go back to the school district and say, you gotta finish the 50 feet to the school, you know, and go from there. Yeah, so Pleasant would be out, Olympic would be out, Hamlet would be in, Douglas Gardens would be in, and then Darlene on the whatever side.
It'd have to be the south.
And then, you know, we asked them to finish the 50 feet into the school. Would people be good with that?
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that. But I do think we should add Guy Lee down here. Like, I do think we should keep that, figure out something around that.
What's that?
Guy Lee, we should add it.
Well, I think that,
Some sort of project.
I think the thing I would be envisioning, because you brought up the same thing with Douglas County, Douglas Gardens, right? Is that it's running the same 50 feet. Like, these are like $30,000 sections of sidewalk, right? Is that before you guys add it as a project, that you guys go back to the school district and say, guys, you need to come up with 30 grand, right? Because we want to do this project, and it needs to go all the way into the school entrance.
I think we can do that, because they'll have some cost savings. We can do the engineering, and then they'll just be paying materials, and they'll get a better price with the quantity.
So, and before we go to Joe, so then if that happens, right, we're not adding those projects into the grand scheme of things, we're just actually finishing things, right? Okay, go ahead.
So if we can, and this is just my voice, not the whole council, but I would like to recommend that we don't just take them off the list and throw it away. Definitely put them on a next list.
Absolutely.
And if we could add 66 or keep that in order, I don't know what Christie's, if she's still listening, but I certainly don't want to wait another 24 months or 18 months to hear about 66 again. But again, just if we can not lose these projects, because they're all very viable projects, and throw in 66 somewhere, so it doesn't fall back off the back burner.
A number of these projects are also identified in the Safe Routes to School program, and they actually keep an active list and rank them for need. And most of these hit high priority on their lists as well.
You good? No. Okay, so timing wise, there's no risk, right? Like, you guys will come back and talk to us when there's an update.
Yeah. We'll talk to the school about Douglas Gardens as well as Darlene.
And I would like to get some more ideas or hear some more ideas on the gravel road, 2 houses path. I would like, I don't want that to die on the vine either. I'd love to hear more, but I'd like to hear more tighter plans, or at least some more
Clarity,
plans,
yeah.
So we can answer those questions.
Yeah, separation from the driving surface versus a pedestrian surface.
Yeah.
And I think there's enough right of way that we could have put a path in south of the existing gravel driveway.
That's possible. Then you got property owners as far as making assumptions as to, is there a right of way increase, or is it decreased?
It's a full right of way width, and we would maintain it inside the, it could be a full street.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just used as an
Make
alley
sure they
right
know
now.
that.
I'm assuming a lot of these are gonna come back up as we start to talk about street bond projects and different things. Some of
Some of those streets are,
I was expecting that they were similar lists. All right,
If you take a look at the Pleasant Street aerial, you can see that people have made their path.
Yeah.
Down the center, which may be why Stan laid that right down the center. So that's something to look at for sure.
perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're gonna pause and switch to executive session. So we're adjourned and then we'll reconvene on the executive session.